Okay, here we go. I am using my same account. I don't want to set up another account. This is where all my medical stuff is. But if you're looking for this, you won't find the medical stuff unless you look through all my videos. But I've long had a problem with my gardening. You know, for the 3 years since I moved here, and I've planted gardens. Well, the vegetable gardens is what I really have the difficulty with, or had the difficulty with. So, you know, last year, I think I overwatered all my small crops in the above ground box, and the roots died and the plants died. I mean, they never got very big. I had a turnip about this big. Had a little carrot about this big, and it was really, really skinny. And then they just quit growing. So I'm quite sure I killed the roots on them by watering them too much. Now the big plants, well, I guess I had the peas and the beans with the other big plants, like tomatoes, squash, melons, and those would all, you know, after like a day, if I skipped watering, I watered twice a day, every day. And if I skipped watering for a day, then they'd look like it. They'd be wilting and stuff. So I had to really hose those guys down. They're water pigs, squash and watermelons. The tomatoes, I had mulch on them, but I still watered them all the time. Didn't get that big of a harvest, and little wonder why. Now, the most asked question about gardening is, how much do I water? Well, I solved that problem. After, you know, all kinds of problems, wondering how much to water things, it finally hit me. I was, excuse me, sore neck. I was looking at the label on one of the plants I bought. It said, water when dry, and I'm going, how do I know when it's dry? Just tell me how many inches to water a week or something. So then I looked at it again. I said, wait a minute. I know how to tell when it's dry. So I went in my bathroom. There's a big cupboard in there where I keep all my gardening supplies, the guest bathroom. And I found it. Here we go. Can you read that? Moisture meter. It's a hygrometer. So you take this little thing, stick it in the ground, and you see, let's see, turn it right the way. There we go. The blue over here is wet. The green here is moist, and the red is dry. Now, if it's over the edge of dry here, I water it. If it's anywhere higher than that, I don't. And you know what I found out? When I actually started measuring, that was the most amazing thing. My garden bed, above ground bed, where I plant all my small crops, it was absolutely dry on top, and I would have watered it at that point a couple times that day, probably once for sure. But I took that probe and stuck it down in there. It said wet. So down below where the roots are, it's wet. And I found, and also all my other sprouts that are coming up in my large garden where I grow all the big fat stuff that spreads all over, like squash and melons and tomatoes. I measured those, and they were all wet. Measured my tomatoes. Well, they were heavily into the moist, were wet. And the tomatoes too. So, and my roses. So I thought, holy crap. Here all this time I thought I needed to water them, and I was over-watering. So get yourself one of these, a hygrometer. They're pretty cheap, like $10 or maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But measure each crop. I mean, first day I measured, one of them was dry, and the next one was wet. So measure each one. And I have found that I only have to water every other day. Maybe it'll be less that I'm watering. But, when you water, soak them down good. Run over them with your sprayer several times until there's water on top. And when that stays on top and doesn't instantly vaporize into the ground, then you're done. It's good and deeply watered. And it'll go 2, maybe 3 days on that. And whatever it is on a vegetable or fruit crop, you should measure it and, water the way I've said. Now with your, with your new plants that you put in the ground, I guess I should say perennials. If you plant perennials, you have to water them like mad the first year. Just keep watering those things every day, or they're going to turn into kindling. So if you plant a new perennial flower, I'm talking about flower gardens now, you water I just have my sprinklers water the garden once a day. But with those new perennial plants, you got to really wet those things down. And don't terribly overdo it, but if you wet it good one day, the next day, it's been looking pretty dry, and you'll probably find it measures dry too if you use the hygrometer. So, or it'll be all shriveled up. You got to really water those things. Growing all those roots the first year, they're gonna be just little tiny plants, even if it's a huge shrub. But those roots, they need to get bigger and bigger. When those roots get bigger and they're all ready to support the plant, the following year, that plant is going to shoot up, and the flowers are going to go crazy, or if it's a fruit-bearing plant, the blossoms are going to be all over it. And always make sure, if you want to get a good crop or good flowers, you fertilize with plenty of potassium. They need a little nitrogen, but they need a lot of potassium. Potassium makes the flowers grow. The flowers make the fruits grow. And on non-crop plants, the flowers get big and pretty. So they need lots of potassium to do that. So the third number on that fertilizer needs to be big. And you probably won't find that in any of the stores anywhere. So might want to look up on Home Depot, high potassium fertilizers, because you want a pretty big number on the third number. And if there's a smaller number on the first number, which is nitrogen. You don't want to get 1 million leaves on the plant. You want to get enough leaves to support the fruit. The potassium will give you lots of fruit. And if you grow tomatoes, put a sunshade over those if you live in a very sunny climate, because that hot sun will make all those blossoms drop and you'll get no tomatoes. All right, so back to the perennial plants. The first year, you gotta keep watering those things or you're going to lose it. So pretty much water every day unless it's like really soggy. So the next year, and I don't have to worry about it. It's going to be like all the other plants, just a 10-minute sprinkle from your sprinkler system, or from your hose if you want to work that hard. All right. And as far as annual plants, well, you're going to have to plant them every year. Water them till they die. I never plant annual plants because that's a lot of work for nothing. There's a lot of beautiful perennial plants, maybe there's a few annual plants that you like, and you could plant a row of those or something. But in my house, I've got plants growing all around on every side, and the planter boxes were already there, so you either got to fill them with chips or plants. So I put plants in all mine, and the sprinkler system feeds them all. So I do nothing, and they just come up beautifully. Well, the only thing I do is fertilize them with high potassium fertilizer, so that the blooms will be good. I put in a moonflower plant last year, and I never got anything out of it. This year, boom, it sprang up like twice as high as it was the first year, and I got 18 little beautiful buttery yellow moonflowers. They're just gorgeous. My wife, she came over and wanted to look at the garden. She said, "Oh, what are these? They're so pretty." Yeah, that's why I bought them. The first one died, so I was lucky with the second one. I made sure to keep it watered all season. So I've learned that. Watch out for those first-year perennial plants, because you can lose them if you don't water them plenty. So, and still, don't keep them too wet. You can still use your little hygrometer and keep them in the moist zone. Moist is where you want it. When it says don't water until dry, don't believe that. Don't water until barely moist would be the better thing to say. Okay, and that's it for how to water your garden, the most asked question on the planet. Okay, yeah, let's put into this one. I got one more. I got one on lawns, if you want to see that. How to effortlessly make the most beautiful lawn you've ever seen. All right, goodbye for now, and until next time, goodbye.